Network.
Hello and welcome to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's face-to-face with video series, in which we invite respected authors, speakers, teachers and researchers to share the stories behind the 10 books that influenced them the most on their life journey. And with me today is Julie Ryan, a psychic, inventor and medical intuitive who can sense what medical conditions and illnesses a person has. Julie sees and talks to spirits, both alive and dead. She also removes ghosts from homes and other buildings. And when she's not busy doing that or scanning callers on her very popular weekly podcast, she's teaching and writing books, which we'll hear a bit more about later. Julie Ryan, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. What a delight to be with you, as always. You are one of my favorite people on the planet.
Well, thank you for that, Julie. So, books, you didn't begin utilising this incredible resource, you say, until you were in the mid-30s. Why not?
You mean my woo-woo abilities?
Well, you're talking about books as a resource.
Oh, books as a resource. Yeah. I didn't care that much about it when I was in school. I'm an entrepreneur, so I had my own ideas about things. And as you mentioned, I'm an inventor of surgical devices sold throughout the world. So the traditional reading thing just didn't appeal to me. And then in my 30s, I started discovering books. I mean, I read books that I had to graduate from school, but I didn't ever really enjoy them. But then when I started in my mid-30s looking into books and starting to read them, then it was like a whole new world, like the Aladdin movie, it was like a whole new world opened up, and it's been amazing ever since.
So did you start reading books because you were interested with your spiritual abilities coming to the fore, or was there another reason that prompted you to start picking up books?
Probably more related, Sandie, to business stuff. I love biographies, and I read a lot of books about entrepreneurs because it gave me the courage to go on when things got tough in my companies and in my businesses. And I got a lot of information from those books about tenacity. And also I got ideas from reading what people went through. And I thought, well, I don't need to reinvent the wheel. If somebody else has already figured this out, I can just emulate what they did. So that's really where it started, was in my business life.
So what was it like for you to have to go back over your reading history and pick just 10 books that had an influence on you?
Well, you limited me because you told me they had to be spiritual books.
Yeah.
So, and I think actually we pared down the list because I sent you some books that were business books that were very influential. And you said, no, we're not going to put those in. And I said, okay. So when I went back over my spiritual books, there are two in particular that really come to mind first. And I talk about them in my book, Angelic Attendants, and those books, the first one was Anatomy of the Spirit by Carolyn Mace. And it talked about her being a medical intuitive. And I thought, what the heck is that? I'd never heard that term before. And so I read that book and I wanted to know more. And at that time, we didn't have the internet yet.
That's right.
I did the old-fashioned thing, and I went to a bookstore because I thought a bookstore would have more information than my local library, perhaps. So I thought, well, I'll try the bookstore first. And when I was there, we hear stories about that were led to books. Carolyn Mace's Anatomy of the Spirit was given to me by a friend. And then I wanted to know more. So I went to the bookstore and I found Hands of Light by Barbara Brennan, who's a former NASA physicist who parlayed very complex quantum physics principles into understandable English for the non-scientific mind. That would be me. And I wanted to know more again. And so that really is what led me into the work that I do now.
So those two books, and they're first and second on your list. So that's the order in which you read them.
Yes.
Yeah. And is the rest of your list in chronological order? Or
no, they're not.
They're not. No. Okay. Just so long as we know, because then it's nice to be able to track, your journey at certain times. So Anatomy of the Spirit, and you say that that launched your 30-year spirituality quest. So what was it like for you to, I mean, did that really blow your mind, that book?
It did, because she was using energy to heal, to help heal people. And then Barbara Brennan, of course, was coming at it from a scientific standpoint. And I had been in the medical field for quite a while at that point. So I thought, oh gosh, I'm working, inventing and designing products to help people heal. Maybe this could be another part of the equation. I was always interested in the healing thing, but I didn't want to go to school to be a doctor or a nurse. I wasn't called to do that. I was called to be a businesswoman. And so that intrigued me with Carolyn Mace's book. And then right after that was Barbara Brennan's book.
So Barbara Brennan's book, I mean, that was just an amazing, amazing book, I thought, when I came across it. What did you make of that book? What was it specifically? Was it the fact that she had such a credible background and she was talking about quantum physics?
Yes, and then that she had techniques that she used to help facilitate healing, and that when she was working on somebody, it could be measured in a physics lab at a university. They would measure her and they could tell what the frequency was of the energy that was being sent. So I was raised Roman Catholic, Sandie, and as little children being raised Catholic, we're taught about angels and saints and Holy Spirit and, all that kind of stuff. So I think it set me up, certainly, to have that foundation of, all right, well, maybe there really is something to this. And it's not just stuff in the Bible and all of that. And so I was intrigued by that. And I called Barbara's school, which at the time was on Long Island in New York. And I said, do you have anybody teaching this stuff in my area? And sure enough, they did. And so then I trained with a woman who had graduated from Barbara's program, and she used her own methodologies and incorporated them into Barbara's books. But Barbara's books were my textbook that I learned when I was studying that stuff. And since that time, fast forward 45 years, from when she wrote that book. And this is what I teach people around the world, but it's very streamlined. That was her way. Of course, we all learn something and then we add our own techniques and our own experiences in there, and we come up with our own mix.
So what was it like for you to discover that you actually had these abilities yourself?
Well, what I learned was that I could learn how to do all this stuff. And what I've learned since then is that everybody has this ability. It's just a matter of developing and enhancing it. I laugh. I say, I'm not one of those psychics who's had dead people chasing her since childhood, or if I did, I didn't know it, let alone what I would have done with that information. So I learned how to do all of this stuff. And whether people think they have any abilities or not, everybody does. It's just learning to develop and enhance it then.
So book number 3 on your list is one that I've not come across before. Death is But a Dream.
Yeah.
Finding Hope and Meaning at Life's End. And this was written by Christopher Kerr, who was the director of a large hospice practice in Buffalo, New York.
That's right. He still is. And he's an MD, PhD. So I call him a doctor. He's a doctor.
A doctor.
And I ran across him, Sandie, and it's a fun story. And actually on my YouTube channel is an interview with him. And how I found out about him, I really believe it was divine guidance, because I was looking online on YouTube to find out, I was looking for a tutorial to teach me how to change the battery in my car key fob.
Not related at all.
Not at all. And Chris showed up and he did a TED talk, and he showed up. I thought everything else was all, how on the sides they have all the different choices that you have. And he was front and center. And I thought, who is this guy and what is he doing? Because it says something like end of life dreams. And I thought, Oh, well, that's interesting. So I checked it. I watched his TED talk. Well, come to find out, he did research on 1,400 hospice patients who report 90% of whom, I think it's 88 point something percent of whom, report seeing the spirits of deceased loved ones and the spirits of deceased pets as they're approaching death. And that's what my book, Angelic Attendants, is about, is how we're all surrounded by angels and deceased loved ones as we're dying. And it's a glorious process that we all go through. And I thought, oh my gosh, this guy's done the science that's catching up with the woo-woo of the stuff that I see. And we talk about the same thing, but his book corroborates everything that I see. So I tease him and I say, my book's the yin and his book's the yang. Mine's the spiritual side, his is the medical and the research side.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that book has been very influential, because when my book is being normally given to people who have a loved one who's dying or who have lost a loved one recently, it brings them lots of comfort. And then what I'll say is, okay, now, read this book, because here's the scientific data. And it really resonated with me because as an inventor of surgical devices, I had to go through clinical studies before I could get my products approved to be sold. It's like drug companies have to test their pharmaceuticals before they sell them. Same with medical devices. And so I knew all about what it was like to do university-based research and get it through that institutional review board and all of that. So we had a fun conversation. And I said to him, how'd you get this by the IRB, is what it's called, in order to begin this study? I said, I have some experience with that. And I'm thinking, how did this guy get this done? So it's really a great read.
Yeah, it's interesting that I was looking at the description on Amazon earlier, and it said over 1,400 patients, more than a decade of quantified data.
Right.
He reveals that pre-death dreams and visions are extraordinary occurrences that humanize the dying process. And, that's what we need. I mean, it is a human process after all. And yet, we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to look at it. People shy away from it. Complete opposite to the birth process, which everyone celebrates. So, yeah, it's about time somebody humanized the process.
Well, and I have a fun story that just happened a couple of days ago along those lines. And one of my dear friend's mother passed on a couple of days ago in the afternoon, very unexpectedly. And she was in an assisted living place, and my friend Lisa had heard from her mother for the past couple of months that her mother was going to go live with her mother, Lisa's grandmother, who'd been dead for over 40 years. And Lisa said to me, my mom keeps saying she's going to go live with her mother. And Lisa said, it's just her dementia talking. And I said, well, maybe she's really seeing her mother, because that's what I perceive from the spiritual side. And it's also what Dr. Kerr's book validates with all that research that he's done. And so lo and behold, when she passed, I said, see, she really was seeing her mom. And her mom was saying, we'll be together again soon. And that's what she was telling you. But you just thought it was dementia. So I think the point of the story is for us to believe our loved ones when they say they're seeing deceased loved ones who've been dead perhaps for decades, and they're seeing the spirits of deceased pets, because they really are. And so my book and Chris's book talk about the same thing. And I think too, along those lines too, Sandie, is that we're so afraid, to your point, of dying. And it's been bastardized throughout history. When you die, are you going to fly or are you going to fry? You're going to go to heaven or you're going to go to hell. And I'm here to tell you that not only all dogs go to heaven, but all people go to heaven as well.
So book number 4, another one I haven't come across before, The Way of the Rose, The Radical Path of the Divine Feminine, Hidden in the Rosary, by Clark Strand and Perdita Finn. So tell us about that one. Sounds interesting.
That one is really interesting because it's the history of the Virgin, basically the Virgin Goddess from way before Christianity, and how the devotions in modern day religions that honor the Virgin Mary, if you will, really get an awful lot of their symbolism and their rituals from ancient pagan rituals from millennia ago. And the book really resonated with me because it was about talking with spirit and having spirit help guide us in our day-to-day lives. And certainly the devotion to the Madonna is not necessarily religious, although that's how most of us have been brought up in this day and age, if we are familiar with the devotion to the Madonna, but it just expanded it out from there. And then there were many miraculous occurrences in the book. So I got to interview both Perdita and Clark. And Clark was a former Buddhist monk, and Perdita was a writing professor at Columbia University in New York. So again, unlikely psychics, if you will, like I am. And I really resonated with their work. It's just terrific.
It says they're weaving together their own remarkable story of how they came to the rosary, their discoveries about the ecofeminist wisdom at the heart of this ancient devotion. We don't hear much about that. And the life-changing revelations of the lady herself.
And they pray the rosary, but it's not only Catholics doing it. We think of the rosary as a Catholic prayer, but it's really universal and it's very ancient. Way predates Christianity and certainly the Catholic Church.
Well, many of the ancient practices have been co-opted, haven't they, over the centuries? Yeah. Book number 5. Slight change here. Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom, Creating Physical and Emotional Health and Healing. Christiane Northrup.
She has become a dear friend. I call her the fairy godmother of women's health. And she's a modern day Joan of Arc in my mind because she's a board certified OBGYN. She's delivered thousands of babies and worked with thousands of patients over the years. And she teaches now in people all around the world, primarily women, how to live better lives, both spiritually and medically. And it was the first book that I read by a physician that combined the mind, body, spirit concept in a way that was very understandable. I had been to a couple of lectures since I read that book early on after I read that book. And I think it was the precursor to these lectures that I went to by a doctor at Harvard named Herbert Benson, who really has brought the mind, body, spirit concept. He and Dr. Weil, who's down in Arizona here in the US. And so I think Dr. Northrup's book kind of laid the foundation so that when I went to Dr. Benson's talks, it was way more palatable and understandable for me. But she is a remarkable woman, and I believe this book should be on every woman's bookshelf on the planet. It's that important.
Yes, I mean, she's certainly a very, very interesting woman. I know people who knew her before she was famous. And it's so interesting how some people start a career and end up taking that career to the nth degree and, helping the entire world with what they know.
Right. Well, the other thing about her is I think that she's the first one that really addressed with women, Sandie, how there was always an emotional component to every illness. And that emotional component is always in place before illness manifests. And I work a lot with clients around the world and do medical scans and energetic healings. And there's always an emotional component that we address. And I believe that's the most important part of the healing, because we can heal body parts all day long. But if we don't heal the emotional part, the energetic part where those wounds are, why bother? Because the body's still going to have medical issues.
Exactly. Yes. So another person who basically said exactly the same thing, very, very popular on the in our archives. Many people mention her. Of course, Louise Hay. You can heal your life.
Right.
And she was also such a pioneer in the mind, body, spirit place. And you can heal your life. I have a copy of it on my desk right now. And it really, every once in a while, I'll look at it and see, okay, early on, when I first started getting into this woo woo stuff, I call it woo woo, affectionately woo woo, I would look up, okay, somebody's got a sore throat. What does that mean? In Louise Hayes' eyes, what somebody's got a cold, somebody's got a broken leg.
Hmm.
What is the emotional component that goes with that? And as I just mentioned, it's such an integral part of us healing when we have a medical condition. And it's not addressed by most doctors.
No, no, no. Sadly, very sadly.
It's
Yeah.
changing. I teach a lot of doctors. A lot of
Yes.
doctors take my class and people from all walks of life. And so then they'll take these energetic healing principles and the woo woo principles back and they'll use them in their practices. And in the reports I hear are really remarkable. I believe the work that I do is part of the healing equation. So that they're adding another piece to the puzzle to help their patients heal.
I'm just going to address some comments that are in the Facebook feed. Apparently, there's a problem with my video feed. People can't see me. I'm hoping they can hear me. The main thing is that they get to see you. But if you can hear me, those of you on Facebook, then I think that we will be able to capture the video at our end and you'll be able to see both of us on the recording that we'll be posting later. So let's move.
Great. She looks great. She looks beautiful for those of you that can't see her at the moment.
Come on, keep saying it, keep saying it. I'll
She's
have some more of that.
She
Thank
looks
you.
fabulous. She's
So number 7. This book is a favourite of mine because I read this probably soon after it was published because I love the actress Shirley MacLaine, Out on a Limb, and it was such a novelty and also so refreshing to actually read a book by someone who was very well known for something else, and she was putting her whole career on the line by talking about this. And I remember some of the early interviews she did, certainly on British TV, where they were really making fun of her for being woo-woo, as you say. But bless her heart, I mean, she stuck to her guns all the way through. So where were you when you came across this book, and what did this book do for you?
Out on a Limb by Shirley MacLaine is the book that
Yeah,
we're
of
talking
course.
about. And I saw her on Oprah. I used to have a video recorder back in the day. And so I would record the Oprah show in the mid-afternoon because I was working, and then I'd watch it later in the evening or on another day. And I, like you, was a big fan of Shirley MacLaine's because she was at the height of her career as an
Yeah,
actress and a
yeah.
song and dance woman. And my goodness, she worked with all the biggest stars on the planet. And she always came off as a little zany in some of her roles, and then she started getting more sophisticated in her roles, like Terms of Endearment. I remember seeing her. You remember that movie?
Yes, I do.
I was in my
Yeah.
20s when that came out, and I remember being on a date, and we went to the movie to see it, and I remember holding my breath in that movie because I was afraid if I breathed, I would sob. I would let out some kind of a moan or sob or something. And so she's such a fine actress and performer. And when she came out with this information on these different experiences that she was having from a spiritual standpoint, boy, it really resonated with me. Not so much because I had similar experiences because I hadn't at that point, but it was just, I found it fascinating. And I thought she was very courageous, to your point, Sandie, that she was willing to put herself out there, because I know I went through the same thing before I started releasing some of my work in my first book, because I thought, I'm a businesswoman. People are going to think I'm nuts. This can hurt my companies and hurt my career. And come to find out it didn't at all, but it certainly was a fear. And I think Oprah has done a great job too of highlighting people like Shirley MacLaine on her show when she had it all those years. And she still does on the platforms in which she's utilizing now. And she has always combined spirituality into other aspects of life. So I give them both a lot of credit. But that's where I first learned about Shirley's abilities to perceive spirit and communicate with spirit.
Did you read any of her other books?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
When she did the was it the Camino? She did the walk. Yeah, that was amazing. I think I've read all of her books, actually.
Yeah.
And she is getting to be quite elderly, but she seems to be still very, very with it and very active. And I see pictures of her every once in a while online or something.
Yeah.
I actually sent her a copy of my book to New Mexico, but I don't think she's living there anymore because it was returned. So I have to figure out how I can get her address and send. I had written her a thank you note, and I sent her a copy of my Angelic Attendants. And I thought, honey, you helped me do this. So I wanted to share
exactly.
that.
I mean, I've been thinking for some time, wouldn't I like to have her 10 best list?
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. And her story.
Well, and she's very into UFOs and aliens and that kind of thing too, which I don't focus on at all. I have had experiences with them with clients. May I share a fun, quick story with you?
Go ahead.
I had a client, or I had a gentleman call into my show, which is a call-in show every Thursday night, and he said, "Do I have any past lives in which are or that are basically influencing what I do in this life?" And I said, "Well, what do you do?" And he said, "I'm an engineer." And I said, "Okay." So what I did was I did a past life scan on him, and this past life came up, and it was on another planet. And when I first saw it, it looked like the set from Star Wars, a Star Wars movie. And I thought, well, maybe this is a future thing. But then I got the year was 1938, I believe. It's my episode 31. If anybody wants to listen to it, Ask Julie Ryan, episode 31. So I started getting all this information, and I got that he was in charge of the electrical grid of this settlement. It looked like a city, again, like out of a Star Wars set. And I said to him, "What kind of engineer are you?" And he said, I'm an electrical engineer. I said, well, there you go. So that's a quick example where I'll see past lives or other entities from different universes and different planets that will come in and communicate. But I certainly am not focused on UFOs or on aliens like Shirley was. Although it's in the news a lot lately, isn't it?
It is in the news a lot lately. Some people say that angels are beings from another planet.
Well, it's feasible. We'll find out when we're dead.
And who knows, we might be angels to other beings from other planets,
Well, there you go.
I don't think any of us really know, so it's all speculation, but it's interesting to ponder.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay, so book number 8, Kabbalistic Healing, A Path to an Awakened Soul by Jason Schulman.
That was another one of my textbooks, Sandie, in the classes that I took. I went through 6 years of intensive study on how to do all of this stuff that I do. So I laugh. I say I'm a businesswoman who learned how to do woo-woo, and I'm a buffet of psychicness. So we do medical stuff. I do pet stuff. I do past life stuff. I can tell how close to death somebody is. We can talk to angels, spirit guides, whatever. Once you connect with spirit, you can take it anywhere you want. And so the Kabbalistic healing was part of the curriculum that I studied. And it's interesting because Kabbalistic healing is Jewish mysticism. And, here's this Catholic girl studying Jewish mysticism, but that's where Christianity came from, right? Jesus was a Jew. And so the interesting thing about the Kabbalistic healing is there are lots of schools of thought about how Jesus was taught Kabbalistic healing. Because if you look at the Bible kind of has a lapse between the age of about 12 for Jesus and then picks back up at the age of about 30, which makes me think, okay, what did they leave out? what's been cut. And there are lots of schools of thought that when Jesus was in Egypt, he learned how to do Kabbalistic healing. And it's supposedly so powerful that it's not written. It's only an oral tradition that's been passed down through the millennia. And it was only passed down to males who were rabbis, who were married, who were over 40. And it's about the transfer of energy in being able to facilitate healing. And so that's what some scholars believe helped Jesus do his miracles, not to negate for those that believe that he was God, certainly, but he was God in the human form. And, the human form can use any modalities that they want. So I found that fascinating. And it's about balance. You have the male and the female, and you want to be in balance. And so I have incorporated over the years what I learned about Kabbalistic healing into the work that I do. It's not that I think, okay, I'm going to use this Kabbalistic healing on this client. It's all melded together now. And it just is my own technique that's come from lots of different modalities that I've studied.
Do you have a name for your technique, or you just call it healing?
Woo-woo.
Woo-woo. Woo-woo healing.
Woo-woo, right? Julie Ryan's form of woo-woo. And it's interesting, in my class, so many techniques and so many schools are, you have to do it this way. You stand on your right leg with your right foot or your left foot in the air, and you draw circles in the air and whatever. I don't do it that way. That's not how I teach. It's about the transfer of energy. And I want my students to be able to utilize their natural abilities of how they receive information from spirit in order to do the work that they want to do, whether it's for profit or whether it's just something that they incorporate into their everyday lives. Certainly, I've had many teachers, professors, medical providers, engineers, housewives, people from all walks of life. And then they incorporate these skill sets that they develop that make sense for them and how they learn. I'm a visual learner. So if I meet somebody at a party, if I hear their name, I'm not going to remember it unless I visualize it in my head. Some people are auditory learners. Some people are kinesthetic learners. It takes me back in my parents' day. If you were a left-handed person, the teacher would make you write with your right hand. Well, why? Who cares? It's how you naturally learn. So that's how I incorporate the work that I do, is when I'm teaching, is we bring in the techniques, but it's within the frame of reference of how the person learns. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. Yeah. So book number 9, great title, The Priest and the Medium, The Amazing True Story of Psychic Medium B. Ann German and her husband, a former Jesuit priest, Wayne Knoll, by Suzanne Geisman. Wow, right. What a title. So tell us about this one.
That one was fun. Suzanne's a friend of mine, and I read that book because the title intrigued me, and I thought it's all the same spirit. Whether you're looking at it from a Jesuit perspective, certainly he's been ingrained with, this is how you look at it, and this is what the theology says, and this is what the philosophy says, and all of that. And that he married a medium who was kind of a wildcatter. She was getting information and helping people and communicating with spirit. It's all the same thing. And it's interesting to me how the religions have been so controlling in the different cultures to be able to control the masses. You've got to come through me, the priest, in order to get to God. Well, no, you don't. It's one way if you choose to do it, and it's all the same spirit. So I laugh because sometimes every once in a while I'll run into somebody and they'll say, well, I just don't believe in that. And I'll say, well, that's fine. And they'll say, well, I'm very religious, or I'm very whatever. And I'll say, great. Do you pray? And they'll say, yeah, of course I pray. And I'll say, to whom are you praying? And they'll say Jesus or the Virgin Mary or St. Anthony or whomever. And I'll say, oh, so is St. Anthony sitting on the couch in your living room when you're talking with him? And they'll say, well, no. And I'll say, oh, is he in spirit form? They'll say, yes. I said, oh, so you're talking to spirits when you're praying? And they'll say, well, it's not the same thing. I'll say, but oh, it is. And I think the Jesuit and the medium are a great example of that. It's all spirit. It's just a different way to communicate
Yes.
with spirit.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I love the write-up on this book that she gave her first spirit readings to her teddy bears at the age of 5, and she was raised in the Mennonite tradition. Interesting that she left home at 14. He left home at 14 to go to seminary. And they say that the book shares the remarkable story of two soulmates on parallel paths with divergent beliefs, yet united in their love for God and each other.
Yeah.
Sums it all up, doesn't it? It doesn't matter what path you're on.
Exactly. And I think it's a great example, too, of people that are joining and they have different methodologies to get to the same place, but they honor each other's different ways that they connect with spirit. It's not my way is right and yours is wrong. It's here's how I do it. Here's how you do it. Where can we meet in the middle?
Yeah. Just respect each other's ways of doing it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we come to book 10. Change your thoughts, change your life. Living the wisdom of the Tao. Wayne Dyer.
Right. Yeah, well, Dr. Dyer, God love him. His books just have been so instrumental in everybody's lives who have had the honor to read them, and he certainly has influenced me and impacted my life in a multitude of ways. And again, he's got that alphabet soup at the end of his name. He's got the PhD, he's got the degrees, and then he's bringing in the spiritual. And I know in his books, a lot of them, St. Francis was one of his spirit guides. So he talked to St. Francis all the time and was able to communicate with him. And I think the story with him about when he had leukemia at the end of his life and he had a healing, and for, I believe it was the last 5 or 6 years of his life, he'd go to the doctor, but he'd say, I don't care about hearing what the test results are because I feel great. And so he was able to live his life without any symptoms, regardless of what the tests were showing. And I think that's a great testament to how spiritual and energetic healing can work. And certainly prayer is a form of meditation. And we know that when a lot of people are focused on a certain outcome or a certain wish, that all that vibration is very impactful to help somebody heal. The prayer chains that we utilize when somebody's having surgery or they're ill, I think come
Well, and
into
it's
play
proven
very
that prayer
clearly.
works. That it
Absolutely.
works. Yeah, they've studied
Absolutely.
prayer. And
Yeah.
it's not, it's intention. It's focused intention. That's what it
Right.
is.
Right. We
You
used
put the thought and the emotion together and, you've got something powerful.
We used to tease my mom, Sandie, because every once in a while there'd be somebody who was suffering and they were in their dying process and they were just hanging on and hanging on. And so she'd go to church and light a candle. And so we used to tease her and say she was lighting killer candles because inevitably she'd light a candle and say a prayer, and then somebody would die within a couple of days. So we'd tease her, we'd say, do you need to go light one of those killer candles for whoever it is that's suffering so they can go on and go? So fun story. But yeah, the power of prayer is
Yeah.
really tremendous.
Yeah. So there's your 10 books. What are you reading now?
I am reading Toxic by Dr. Neil Nathan, and it's about mold toxicity and people who are exposed to mold and how to treat it, because I see so many clients, see in my mind's eye, when I scan them, who have had mold exposure and they've been to many doctors and they're not able to get well. The doctors don't know what's going on. And this guy's figured it out. He's one of my go-to guys on mold toxicity. So that's what I'm reading right now. I just finished reading a biography of a guy that oh gosh, I can look on my phone what it's called. I think it's called It's Good to Be Lucky, and by a guy named Andy Friendly. And he's an entertainment executive in Hollywood and was instrumental in lots of the American TV shows that we would know that are still on the air, some of them after 30 years. And he's married to a retired movie star, and his grandson is one of my son's dearest friends. So I got to read that, and that was really fun. I just finished that book. So now I'm halfway through Dr. Nathan's books. So I'm kind of all over the place with
Yeah,
the books
eclectic.
that
Yeah,
I choose. Yes.
yeah. Do you, in the toxic book, I mean, what sort of, I would imagine that it affects people in different ways, that it would go straight to their weak spots, perhaps. So there's no set, symptoms that are true for everybody.
Well, absolutely. The symptoms range, and I see this with clients when I'm scanning them. They can range from chronic sinus infections or neuralgia to GI issues to, my gosh, things as intense as MS and muscular dystrophy and ALS and things like that. Cancer. I see a lot of patients who have cancer who have huge mold toxicity in their bodies when I scan them. One client in particular is a physician, and she lives in California, and she has pancreatic cancer. And I've been working with her, and I said, my goodness, first time I scanned her, Sandie, I said, where is the mold? You are full of black mold. And she said, it's in my house. I live at the beach. And I said, well, you need to find someplace else to live till you can get that remediated. But what I've learned over the years is that the symptoms are so far reaching and don't seem to have any rhyme or reason that this is your symptom, this is this. And doctors haven't been trained on it. And the other thing that's so important is when somebody is detoxing from mold exposure and also yeast overgrowth, which is also known as leaky gut, those go hand in hand. But as the person's detoxing, everybody's different because some people's systems can detox easier than others. And 25% of the population does not have the ability to detox mold. They need help.
So how would one get tested? What kind of tests do they do?
There are lots of tests that can be done. There are urine tests primarily where they can tell what kind of mold you've been exposed to. And I'm one of those 25% that if I walk in a room, I know instantly if there's a mold issue in there. And my husband, Sandie, is just totally oblivious. He has no reaction. And I'm saying, I'm out of here. I'm not staying here. I'm like a canary in the coal mine. So I'm one of those 25%, which I believe is a superpower because nobody needs to be exposed to that because it's toxic. So there are binders that are used that are different pharmaceuticals. Sometimes there are herbal remedies. There's activated charcoal. There's bentonite clay, things like that. But it's really important to be working with somebody that knows what they're doing on this because if a person is suffering from this and they're detoxing too quickly, it can really throw them into a tailspin and cause more harm than good. So it's interesting learning about it. And I'm led to these different books because it helps me with my clients, helps me understand what I'm seeing. A great example is I, for years, have seen these cells in people's energy fields. I'm like a human MRI, and I'll see these cells and they have a little red dot in them. And I thought, what the heck is that? Well, come to find out from reading a book, they're called mast cells. I watch DNA healings. I watch other types of healings that emulate what I saw in operating rooms for all those years when I was in that business, developing and designing and inventing surgical devices. And that helps me know what's going on. So I just read the books that I'm led to read. It feels like spirit's guiding me to read certain books. And that's
Do you find it hard to switch it off? I mean, you go out and you're relaxing and socializing and, among people. Do you find that you have to, work at switching off the medical intuitive part so that you're not constantly scanning people?
No, because I turn my abilities on and off at will. So I don't have them on most of the time. And it's not just for medical. I mean, if I had my psychic abilities on, I'd be seeing spirits everywhere and hearing conversations with spirits and all that kind of thing. So no, and that's what I teach is we turn it on and off at will. So no, I'm just a regular wife and mom, and I cook dinner and do
Yeah,
laundry and
regular Ghostbuster, wife
yeah,
and
yeah,
mum. I
yeah,
see dead people,
businesswoman.
wife and
Yeah,
mum.
yeah, yeah, yeah. My son, when he was little, he's now 29, and he was when he was little, he'd say, "Mommy, ask the spirits and beyond." I was like, "Okay, let me do that. Let me turn on my radar." Or if I walk into a place, and there's a chapter in my book that I talk about this, and I walk into a place, and so if I'm with someone who knows that I do woo woo, they'll say, "Well, what are you picking up?" I'll say, "Well, what do you mean?" So, well, is there any spirits in here? I was like, I don't know. I don't have my radar turned on. Let me turn my radar on and I'll see. And then I do. So it's fun.
Yeah. So, how did you become an inventor of surgical devices?
I started out right out of college working for a medical supply company, huge global medical supply company, and I sold hospital supplies. So I would go into hospitals and I had hundreds of thousands. I worked for a big distributor and I worked with manufacturers. And I worked in a hospital when I was in college for 2 years in the public relations department. And they offered me a job, and I knew I didn't want to work in a hospital, but I knew I wanted to do something with medical. Like I said, I didn't want to be a doctor or a nurse or or a tech or a medical provider. So I wanted to be a businesswoman. So I thought, okay, well, I'll combine the hospital sales stuff with my interest in medical things. And so I did that. And then I started my first company at 25. And because I figured out I wasn't a very good employee because I had different ideas about things. And I performed well and my sales numbers were great, but I had a boss, Sandie, that gave me grief about how my trunk was organized in my car with my samples. And I thought, who cares how my trunk is organized? Look at my sales numbers. And so I had the opportunity to bring to market a device that was being used for vascular surgery. And I introduced it to the American marketplace and started a company to do that. And then within a couple of years, it was so successful that I had some orthopedic surgeons. I was living in Los Angeles at the time that were jerry-rigging this vascular surgery product to use with total joint surgery. And I thought, we need to get this through the FDA, the governing bodies. We need to get approval before you guys just start using this for a different thing. So I helped develop that with the company that was selling it. And then they went with a big global distributor, and breached my contract. So I sued them. I was in federal court. I wasn't even 30 yet. I was in federal court for 10 days in Boston, and they walked in. That was a $30 billion company that I sued. And I thought, I'm young, I'm a girl, and I even have blonde hair, but we've got this contract here, guys. And so I won the lawsuit, and then I started a company to compete with them because I knew everything that was wrong with their product. I knew everything that was wrong with everybody else's product. And I brought in a couple of brilliant engineers, and we broke their patents and designed around it. And then I signed with the largest orthopedic global distributor on the planet and beat them at their own game with that one little product. So that's really the long and the short of how I got into that. And then since that time, I had invented several others, but that's really how I got into it. And I look back at that now at this age and I think, oh my gosh, I can't believe I had the guts to do that. But I know now that I was being led every step of the way. And I trust that the people I need to show up when I need them, and they always do.
Do you think that your psychic ability helped you in inventing devices, and maybe you didn't even know you had the psychic ability back then?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that everybody, again, has the ability. And I just talked to a client before I got on this call with you, and he was telling me that he meditates all the time, but he doesn't hear anything from his spirit guides. And I said, well, how do you think you're going to hear? He said, well, I'm going to hear them talking to me. I said, well, they communicate telepathically. It comes in as a thought in your head. I said, they're communicating with you. You're just expecting it to be in a different way than what's really happening. So thoughts originate in the ethers. We pull them into our heads based on what we're thinking about. And that's how we're guided by our angels and our spirits. So certainly, I mean, how does a girl with a communications degree develop orthopedic surgery devices? That doesn't make sense. But that's what I've done. How does a girl with a communications degree have 9 companies in 5 industries that I've founded? I've had companies in industries that I didn't know anything about, but I was just interested in them. So absolutely, I was being led. Yeah, and that was long before I knew I could communicate with spirit. Now I do it
Yeah.
on purpose, which makes it even more fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember reading a book some years ago. Somebody had gone to some of the top CEOs in America and asked them how they made their decisions. And a massive percentage of them said, it's my gut,
Yeah.
it's my intuition. And yet none of them would consider themselves psychic.
Right. But I
Yeah.
talk to a lot of them.
Mm.
They call me and we talk to their spirit guides and get information. That's not unusual that I'll have corporate executives and we'll do a session with their spirit guides and we'll get them guidance. So I'll help them learn how to communicate with their spirit guides by themselves. And then and then when they do that, then they'll do another session with me and they'll say, okay, here's what I'm getting. I need some kind of corroboration from you to be sure that I'm on the right path. And I think the key really is paying attention to the thoughts that come into your head, but pay attention to how they feel. Because if they feel neutral or good, you're in alignment with your spirit. That is spirit talking to you. If you feel bad, you're out of alignment. And our emotions are an internal GPS system that we all have.
Mm.
And we're taught as children to control our emotions when what we need to be controlling is our thoughts.
Yeah.
Because emotions are our GPS system saying, okay, you're thinking clearly, you're in alignment with your spirit, you're on the right path. And when you feel badly, you need to investigate what is it that I'm fearing? Is it something that's real or is it something that's imagined? And 99% of the time it's imagined.
Mm. So which part of all of the things that you do, entrepreneur, businesswoman, ghostbuster, psychic, which part do you love the best?
I love them all. I love them all. And they're all melded together now because I sold my surgical device manufacturing company. I've got a couple of companies that are still running that I have wonderful people that are running them. So I really spend all of my time these days doing the woo-woo stuff, working with clients, doing my weekly show, writing books, doing the training, and it keeps me busy. So I'm utilizing the entrepreneurial skills that I've developed over the past 40 years, and they've melded into the woo-woo and the spiritual, and it's just a blast. I have had a lot of fun in my life with these different companies that I've had. Certainly there's been a roller coaster ride. No entrepreneur goes through having a company without a roller coaster ride, but this is by far the most fun on a day-to-day basis that I've ever had. And there's still work involved. I mean, I spend a couple of hours in the office at least most days doing follow-up with clients and developing things, but it's just a blast. It's so much fun. And it's because I'm spirit's pure love and pure joy. And that's where I hang out,
Yeah.
talking with clients all day.
Mm-hmm. That's the frequency. So tell us about your books. You've written 3 books,
Right.
Angelic Attendants, What Really Happens as We Transition from This Life into the Next.
I have show and tell here. I have books, as you can see. This is Angelic
Okay.
Attendant. Yes. And then Angel Messages for Kids was my first children's book. I had so many moms, Sandie, and grandmothers, and it's darling. Look at these illustrations. My illustrators in the UK, and they're colorful and kids love them. But I had so many moms over the years say to me, can you write a children's book so that we can explain to our small children how can they communicate and see spirits when I can't? And how do they know information from these spirits that we're able to corroborate? And this child can't read yet. How do they know this stuff? And then I've had moms say, well, my child knows things from past lives that we've been able to validate with historical data online. And again, this child can't read. This child's 4. They don't have any access to this data. Like things about battles and places where they lived in certain times and what was going on, and they're able to corroborate this information. And then lastly, and very commonly, how do we explain to our child when a loved one dies? How do we explain, well, grandma's in heaven now, granny's in heaven, and little Johnny's saying, no, she's not, she's in that box over there asleep, because they're at the funeral home. And so that's what these children's books, this series of children's books, has been all about. So that's Angel Messages for Kids. And then the sequel is Angel Messages for Dogs. So we talk about...
So you're going to have to explain that one to me, because I'm sure the dogs aren't asking questions.
No, it's about how dogs, what they do, and how a dog is a spirit and a body. And when the dog decides to become a puppy, it chooses the family that's going to love and take care of it. And here's what happens when a dog dies. But interspersed in that are a lot of fun things like, dogs can learn tricks for treats, and dogs like to greet other dogs, and there'll be a cute picture of a little tiny teacup poodle and a big Great Dane or something, meeting each other. So it gets the spiritual information in there in a fun, colorful way. And I just submitted the manuscript for Angel Messages for Cats to my illustrator, because that'll be out at the end of the year. Because I was getting grief from the cat lovers out there, Sandie, that were saying, okay, you wrote one for dogs, now you need one for cats. Yeah. So
are you self-publishing?
Yes, I am. And I really, actually, I turned down a couple of offers from big international publishers. And people said to me, are you nuts? What are you doing? And I said, I have several friends who are bestsellers who've all told me to do it myself, because I can keep control of it. Absolutely. And I've had several of those bestsellers say to me, New York Times bestsellers say to me, when their contract is up, they're not going to go back with the big publishers, especially for somebody who is unknown. They don't do anything for you.
No.
I'm a businesswoman, so I hired an editor who's very well known and has worked in a lot of the mind, body, spirit space with New York Times bestsellers. I hired her. I hire illustrators. I hire the people that I need, the graphic artists and all of that. Mm-hmm. And my editor said to me, you don't need a publisher. You can do all of this on your own, especially with your business background.
Yeah.
So that's what I've done.
It's an interesting industry, and it has completely changed since I entered it straight from school many years ago. And yes, once upon a time, self-publishing was considered vanity publishing. And now I tell all my clients, if you've got the opportunity to do it yourself, you make more money, you keep control. Your biggest challenge is you've got to promote it.
Well, I have friends that are with big publishers, and the publishers are refusing to publicize their books.
Well, that's also what's changed. Yeah, they're saying hire your own publicist, hire your own editor. It's like, okay, so what good is a publisher these days?
I was told, well, we have contacts, we can get you on TV shows and stuff like that. I said, I can hire a PR firm. What are you doing for me? Yeah. The other thing is, I have a friend that's a New York Times bestseller, and his contact at his publisher left, and he hasn't been able to get anybody to return his phone calls for the past several months.
Mm. Yeah.
So,
yeah. I love the publishing industry, and it's got to come up with a new way of doing business if it wants to stay alive. Otherwise, people will just be doing it themselves. And that's not a bad thing for some.
Well, the other thing for me, 2 points. Number one, I didn't want to spend a lot of time finding an agent and shopping publishers. I had 2 publishers come to me through people that I knew who told these publishers about about my book. And it was wonderful to talk with them. But as I mentioned, I turned it down. The other thing is, I just wanted to mention that my publishing company is called Clement Inc., and it's named after Pope Clement VI, who is my spirit guide. So Pope Clement is the one who advises me on all things woo-woo, and so I named my publishing company after him, which is kind of fun.
Well, another neat thing about publishing yourself means that you can give away as many books as you want to, and you are giving away one of your books. So tell people about it.
That's right. Anybody that's listening, either now or in the future, that would like a copy of Angelic Attendants, What Really Happens as We Transition from This Life to the Next, this book here, or if they want one of the children's books, just put a note. Just go to AskJulieRyan.com, which is my website. AskJulieRyan.com, click on the Ask Julie button in the menu and just say, hey, I saw you on Sandie's show and I would love a copy of Angelic Attendants. And if you have kids or grandkids and you want the children's books, we'll send you those as well. And we'll send you a digital and an audiobook version of the books. And it'll be my delight to share that with you. Because Angelic Attendants, what happens as we're dying, is the story about how angels and deceased loved ones surround us. And then there are lots of client stories in there that are just heartwarming. And they provide so much comfort to people, Sandie. And we're all going to be in that situation someday where someone we love is going to pass. So my feeling is, if you know this information up front, even if you don't have anybody at the moment that's dying, if you know this information up front, have this in your back pocket, already know it, so that it's going to help you get through it when the time comes. And then certainly for people who have a loved one who's dying, this can help provide comfort, and for those who have lost a loved one. My parish, my church gives a copy of this book to everybody that comes in to plan a funeral. And I have churches all over the U.S. of all denominations that use it in their Bible study classes and in their book clubs. So it provides so much comfort to people.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that generous offer. And before we close, tell people a little bit about your podcast and where they can find it.
Well, we do it live every Thursday night at 8 Eastern. And so it's distributed all over. It's a syndicated radio show. So it's on a lot of radio stations here in the US. And then we remove the commercials and release it as a podcast. But I'll have people call in from all over the world and they ask Julie Ryan. They ask me a question about medical or their pet or their love life or their work, or should I move, or can you communicate with my deceased loved one? What phase of transition is my dying mother in? What does she need? I communicate with patients all the time who are dying and are unable to verbalize what they need anymore. So I'm kind of like an interpreter, from the spiritual world, and it really helps the families when that happens. So it's a plethora of questions. It's always fun every week, new callers, new questions. And it's always fun to see who's calling in and what their questions are.
I'm
So
sure.
AskJulieRyan.com. Everything's there, the call-in numbers, all of that.
Julie Ryan, thank you for joining us today. It's been a delight speaking with you and hearing about your 10 best spiritual books.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome, Julie. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you for joining us. If you want to be the first to be notified of these events and new 10 best spiritual book lists as they get published, sign up for our newsletter at the nobsspiritualbookclub.com. You can also download audio versions of each episode, and you can listen at your leisure to Om Times Radio, iTunes, Spotify, Anchor, and many other podcast sites. So that's it from me this week. I hope you'll join me again at the same time next week. Till then, it's goodbye from me.